Hello once again, and Tony here, and this time I'm taking a look at the second installment of the Rugrats Tales from the Crypt series, and that is Three Jacks and a Beanstalk, which was based off the traditional English fairy tale Jack and the Beanstalk, alongside some other nursery rhymes and fairy tales like Jack Sprat, Jack and Jill, Oscar Wilde's The Selfish Giant, Tom Thumb, and the Gingerbread Man, and also a few cameos from other fairy tales. This was directed by Zhenya Delucin, Michael Dedalus Kenny, Ron Noble, Andrei Svitovsky, and Jim Duffy. It was produced by Susan Ward, Jill Gorey, Jim Duffy, and Barbara Herndon, and the voice direction was done by Charlie Adler, and this film was released back in September 6, 2006. Now, I also had my doubts about this film as well, seeing that it was also a sequel to the first installment of the Rugrats Tales from the Crypt series. But it was safe to say that after watching it, I was more than satisfied with it. This was definitely a great follow-up, and this definitely improved, and I was absolutely astonished with it. And with that said, I'll get to the story, the animation, music, characters, and voice acting. Now let's start off with the story. I'd have to say that this improved from the first installment. While the first installment was kind of rocky and rather unsmooth in its execution, this one was smoothly done, and I felt like I was able to follow along a lot better with no interruptions whatsoever, and I really enjoyed the story a lot more, and I even enjoyed its structure a lot more. And it's also helped by the fact that there was also the addition of this cow called Aunt Moo. Now, in the original fairy tale, Jack has a widowed mother, and they even have a cow that they sold to a merchant. Now, this installment has Aunt Moo play both the role of the widowed mother and that of the cow, in which she owns her own milk shop and charges $3 for a bottle of milk. And when business doesn't even go so well, reducing the price to $2 and her milk supply runs out, you really start to feel for her situation. So basically, you could really tell that this was a better story as well. I mean, we start off with Jack and his younger brother, and in the original fairy tale, Jack was an only child. And his younger brother, played by Dill, and Jack was played by Tommy, didn't really have a name, so I'd rather say that we should just call him Jack Jr. And Tommy, who is basically the Jack Sr. So it's safe to say that they should have just called Dill, who played Jack's kid brother, as Jack Jr. And then they meet other characters from nursery rhymes like Jack and Jill, who ended up being injured and then find out that they don't even have parents of their own, or they don't even have a home to call their own. So Aunt Moo takes them in, and even find this other country boy along with his sister called Jack Sprat and Little Sprat. And we find out that if you know the nursery rhyme, Jack Sprat eats no fat, his wife eats no lean, and then they both lick their plates clean, and something like that. I'm just surprised that we don't really get to see Jack Sprat's sister look chunkier in comparison to Jack, which kind of makes sense because, okay, he's just his sister. I'm just surprised that we don't even get to see his wife or girlfriend, which is kind of a disappointment because it's just mainly used as a reference. But still, at least the bond between, well, Jack Sr. and Jack Jr. and their new siblings with Auntie Moo was pretty much the biggest highlight of the story, as you get to see, well, their travels and their trials together. Usually it's just Jack that goes solo up the beanstalk in order to retrieve like three things from the giant, like the golden harp, the goose that lays golden eggs, and many other riches from the giant's castle. But in this, we get to see Aunt Moo join in on the kid's journey, and it's rather enthralling. You could really tell that she really does care for her kids and that she'll do whatever it takes to really protect them. And the addition of Aunt Moo as both the widow mom and even as the cow in this story, I thought it was just really well done. Even with the inclusion of elements from Oscar Wilde's The Selfish Giant, I thought was just really well done. If you don't know that short story, it goes like this. There is a giant that owns a very huge mansion, and he has a lot of very fine things and very wonderful smelling flowers, and even like basically is living the luxurious life. There are kids that come to play that are near the garden, but the selfish giant scares them away. It doesn't take until some time later that he finally has a change of heart after the winter melts, and he decides that the children should come and play along in his garden as well, and he even becomes happy with their presence. So overall, the story did improve vastly compared to the first installment, which was definitely a huge plus for me, and it was just really worthwhile, especially considering that the addition of Aunt Moo really didn't hurt the story. It made it a lot better. The animation was still very decent and still pretty good, and what more can I say about it? It manages to be very good and manages to be very good for a TV film. Nothing more can be said. The music, while there were some musical numbers that were quite forgettable, especially when it came to Harold's solo when he played the giant slave, I thought was rather forgettable. It was not the most memorable musical number that I've heard. It also didn't help that he was almost about to hurl when he was about to like twirl around. It almost looked like he was almost about to vomit as soon as he did those twirls. Though it is safe to say that at least it's not ear-rapingly bad. I'd have to say that the music is still decent yet forgettable. But what's worth mentioning is that even though Monique didn't end up singing Aunt Moo's lines, it was Rain Pryor, who was the daughter of the late comedian Richard Pryor, who sang Aunt Moo's lines when it came to the baby's chorus lines. And then we get a chorus number at the end. Even though the vocals are really good, especially coming from Cree Summer and Cheryl Chase and many other cast members, I thought the final chorus was rather forgettable and I didn't enjoy it too much. So overall, while the music was also forgettable, it was still okay. I mean, it did share the same flaws in terms of its music like in the first installment. But what's also worth mentioning was that the opening, I didn't care for the opening to both of these installments that much. I thought they sounded too rushed, and I thought they were pretty sporadic, and it just didn't really lead me in that well. But still, at least it was decent. The characters, I have to say, were still pretty good. I mean, they were still very enjoyable. The biggest highlight definitely had to be Aunt Moo, who was a very wonderful addition to the main heroes, and especially to the main franchise itself. She was definitely a mother figure who was tough, assertive, and just absolutely great. Just absolutely great. She was a great addition to the main heroes, and She almost reminds me of Lois Foutley with a lot more sass and a lot more cunning and with a lot of flair and personality. And she could be actually on par with Lois Foutley. I definitely enjoyed her presence, and I definitely enjoyed the constant rapports that she has with her customers, especially challenging them to an arm wrestling match, which I really had a lot of fun with. And when you could really see that she had to end up adopting those two other Jacks and their sisters, I could really see that she's willing to do whatever it takes in order to become their best mother figure. And even when all hope was lost, you could really see the struggle in her eyes. You could see that, yes, this is also quite typical of fairy tales that talk about poor families. You could see that the children almost have no choice but to work, and at times their parents really do suffer, which is also why I love the Engelbert Humperdinck's opera version of Hansel and Gretel. While the original Grimm fairy tales version had a wicked stepmother, I thought she didn't really add anything other than to just be really mean to both Hansel and Gretel. But with the opera version, we have Gertrude, who is a long-suffering mother who is very, very sad and very distraught about their current situation. And when she finds out that Hansel and Gretel are misbehaving, she lashes out on them because you could really tell that they are living in such shitty conditions. And, well, you could really feel the pain in her eyes. And then you have Petra coming in, who manages to be a broom maker and does business with that, and manages to do a lot of trading, and manages to even bring home a lot of food in the house, which makes Gertrude very happy. So, in essence, Aunt Moo not only reminds me of that of Jack's widowed mother, and even playing the role of both of them, like both the widowed mom and the cow, but she also has a hint of Lois Foutley, and even that of Gertrude and Peter from the Humperdinck's opera version of Hansel and Gretel. She's someone who is a very strong and caring mother figure to all of her 6 younglings, and it's also easy to say that she also does suffer from time to time, and even like when she ran out of milk, and when she saw that huge pasture full of wheatgrass, she ended up gobbling it up. And that's what I really loved about the addition of Aunt Moo as a character. She was definitely a lot of fun, and she really worked well. And as a character, she had a lot of personality, and she was a great mother figure to all 3 Jacks and their sisters, respectively. I mean, not necessarily the sister, but their younger siblings. With Jack Sr., he has Jack Jr. With Jack number 2, he has Jill. And with Jack number 3, he has Lil Sprout. And the 3 Jacks were played by Tommy, Chucky, and Phil. I thought they were really fun as the Jacks, and they definitely had a lot of funny moments. But with Phil, there are moments in which he did have some butt jokes thrown in here and there. And they definitely had a lot of interesting personalities. Yes, with Dill as Jack Jr., he probably doesn't do that much rather than, like, spout a few one-liners. And then you have, well, Jill, who was played by Kimmy. She was okay, really. And then you have, what do you call this? Lil, who played Little Sprout, who I thought was also very great as well. And then you have the Giant, and even her slave, played by Harold. The Giant was played, once again, by Angelica, taking up an antagonistic role. I thought they were really great in their roles as well. And other characters that were also very fun to see were also the likes of Humpty Dumpty, who ended up giving Aunt Moo a ride, and then you even have the joke-telling Goose, who I thought was just really fun as well. And, well, they were all great characters, especially when it came to Susie as the good fairy. I just wish that she could have just given them the 3 tasks rather than just have one task each time because I thought it was just rather tedious and it kind of made the story drag a bit. But still, there were also moments in which it also reminded me of the selfish giant. I mean, you have this giant, played by Angelica, that lives in this huge castle with all the fine goodies, but she refuses to share it with the other commoners, which was interesting because once upon a time, it used to be in care of a valiant knight. But unfortunately, he ended up being kicked out by the giant, and then, well, yeah, a lot of things happen, and especially considering that she now has a slave and she even has a pet cat. And the ending I thought was pretty predictable, but it almost reminded me of that of the Selfish Giant, in which the giant has a change of heart and decides to become friends with the children. In this case, Angelica the giant feels very sad and is wailing and crying that nobody's going to come to her birthday party. And I thought that this was definitely another highlight in the story. And it also did remind me of the Selfish Giant, though it was basically the giant having to realize his actions after many seasons and finally realizing that during spring he can let the kids come in and play along with him. So, yeah, and even the accordion was also a lot of fun as well. So overall, the characters definitely made a great boost in this sequel, and they were still very charming as well. And aside from your usual voice actors like E.G. Daly, Nancy Cartwright, Cheryl Chase, Cree Summer, Dion Kwan, Kath Soucie, and even Amanda Bynes as Taffy, and Pat Musick as Harold, yeah, I didn't really care for Harold as a character. He was basically the typical nice guy, and that's just pretty much it. Who's pretty much pushover towards Angelica, and at times tries to be her best friend, but there's nothing to write home about his character. But still, the voice acting was very superb. Special note should go to Monique for giving such a very wonderful performance as Aunt Moo. For those of you who don't know Monique, you might know her in the film Precious, in which she plays Precious's abusive, insane, and kind of mean mother, Mary. And in this role, she was nominated for several Academy Awards and several other awards as well. She does a lot of stand-up comedy work and has been established as a stand-up comedian. And she's not only great in the field of comedy, but she's also great in the field of drama. So she's a very versatile actress. And her portrayal of Aunt Moo is definitely evident. She not only gives a warm, motherly sensation to this character, but she also gives a very tough streak as well, which makes Aunt Moo a very wonderful and very, very exciting character to have as well. And almost a welcome addition to any Rugrats franchise. And then you have the likes of Paula Tiso, who has a cameo as Henny Penny. Now, for those of you who don't know who Paula Tiso was, she was also the voice of Polly Schuster from As Told by Ginger. You know, the young girl who has a lot of parrot-like tendencies and is kind of cuckoo in the head. Yeah, here she is playing Henny Penny. So basically, Henny Penny does have a cameo in this adaptation of a classic fairy tale. And basically, for those of you who don't know Henny Penny, or known in America as Chicken Little, it tells a story about a chicken who thinks that the sky is falling. And lots of hijinks happen, and then the fox eats all the other animals. But then in other versions, they tell the king about that recent event. And, well, you could say that things are kind of settled after the end of that fairy tale. And then you also have the likes of Rain Pryor giving off her magnificent vocal pipes to Aunt Moo's singing voice. I thought she was just gorgeous in terms of her singing, especially helped with the fact that she's also a contralto who really gave it her very best and belted to the best of her abilities. And she's also a jack of all trades. Not only is she an actress, but she's also a comedian, she's also a producer, she's a writer, she's a singer, she's a lot of things, and she really did her best in giving off Aunt Moo's singing voice that I would have wished that Monique could have also, sung as well. That would have been a great challenge for her. And then you also have the likes of Billy Vera, who is a very well-known rock and R&B and pop singer in the 70s and 80s. You might know him from the film A Mighty Wind, and he really did give a fun portrayal of the accordion. And also Kathy Najimy as the goose who lays the golden eggs. Now, the goose in this version is a try-hard comedian who tries to tell the best jokes, but is often giving off really corny jokes. And every time she gives off a corny joke, she lays a golden egg, which I thought was a really nice twist. And she doesn't like, and basically the goose in this version does not like being upstaged by other comedians that are deemed better than her. So, yeah, she really did give her very best performance in this TV movie, and I really enjoyed just the constant rapports that she has with the other characters. And even the likes of character actor Don Lake as Tom Thumb and the Gingerbread Man. I thought he was very enjoyable in both of these very short roles. So overall, this is definitely miles better than its predecessor. It's a lot more enjoyable, and it's something that I managed to have a lot of fun with. And even the addition of Aunt Moo was definitely a huge highlight for me. Even though this film did have a couple of problems in terms of the musical numbers, it's still a very worthwhile sequel to the original. So with that said, I give this a 4 out of 5 stars. It's definitely worthwhile, and sure, there may be flaws in between, but I'm sure that you'll have a lot of fun with it as well, especially considering that Aunt Moo was a great addition to the Rugrats franchise, and it was also helped by the fact that Monique gave off a very wonderful portrayal of this very bubbly and very, very fun character. So, if I were you, go check it out. And you could even check out the original fairy tale it was based on, and even the other cameos of each of the fairy tales, like Jack, or even the nursery rhymes, like Jack Sprat, Jack and Jill, and even Oscar Wilde's The Selfish Giant, which it also took some cues from. So overall, like I said, go check this film out if you're very interested with it. I mean, you'll have a lot of fun with it as well, especially considering that it's actually quite better than the first installment. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in later as I check out... Oh boy, this is it, folks. The penultimate nail on the Rugrats franchise's coffin. And just by looking at the opening, I don't think I'm going to be enthusiastic about this review. I'm of course referring to Rugrats preschool days. So until then, see you later, and as always, God help me.